Dean Martin was offered the James Bond role before Sean Connery. His reason for saying no changed cinema history and created the 007 we know today. It was February 14, 1962, Valentine's Day, when the phone call that would reshape cinema history was made. In his Beverly Hills office, Dean Martin was reviewing scripts for his upcoming television show, when his agent, Mort Viner, called with what he described as the opportunity of a lifetime. Little did anyone know that Dean's response to this opportunity would create one of the most iconic characters in film history, just not in the way anyone expected. On the other end of that call was Cubby Broccoli, the legendary producer who, along with his partner Harry Saltzman, had just acquired the film rights to Ian Fleming's James Bond novels. They were preparing to launch what they hoped would become a successful film franchise, starting with Dr. No. But they faced a crucial challenge, finding the right actor to bring the sophisticated British secret agent to life. Broccoli and Saltzman had been studying the American market carefully. They understood that for James Bond to succeed internationally, they needed a star with global appeal, someone who could embody the suave, dangerous charm that Fleming had written into his novels. Their research had led them to one name that appeared on every list: Dean Martin. Dean Martin, at 44, was at the absolute peak of his career in early 1962. His partnership with Jerry Lewis had ended years earlier, but Dean had emerged from that breakup as a major solo star. His recording career was flourishing with hits like Everybody Loves Somebody. His film career was booming with successful pictures like Some Came Running and Rio Bravo, and his association with the Rat Pack had made him one of the most recognizable entertainers in the world. More importantly, Dean Martin possessed exactly the qualities that Broccoli and Saltzman were looking for in their James Bond. He had the sophisticated charm, the effortless cool, the way with women, and the ability to handle both action and humor that seemed perfect for Fleming's creation. Dean was also Italian-American, which the producers thought might help the character appeal to European audiences while maintaining American box office draw. When Mort Viner explained the offer to Dean, the numbers were impressive. Broccoli and Saltzman were prepared to offer Dean a 3-picture deal worth $400,000 per film, plus a percentage of the profits. In 1962, that was an enormous offer for what was essentially an untested franchise based on novels that, while popular, had never been adapted for film. But there was a catch, and it was a significant one. The James Bond films would require extensive location shooting. Dr. No was scheduled to be filmed in Jamaica, with additional shooting in London. Future Bond films would likely involve locations around the world, anywhere the scripts demanded. The producers were looking at filming schedules that would keep their star away from home for months at a time. Dean listened to the offer carefully, asked a few questions about the character and the production schedule, and then gave an answer that would echo through cinema history for the next 60 years. "I'm not interested," Dean said simply. Mort Viner was stunned. This wasn't just a good offer. It was potentially a career-defining franchise opportunity. "Dean, are you sure? This could be huge. The producers are talking about making this into a series, possibly for years to come." But Dean Martin had already made up his mind, and his reasoning revealed something fundamental about his character and priorities that many people in Hollywood didn't understand. "Mort," Dean explained, "I've got a good life here. I'm home for dinner with my kids every night. I play golf at Hillcrest every Thursday. I perform in Vegas when I want to. I make movies when the scripts are good, and I record when I feel like singing. Why would I want to spend months in Jamaica, or London, or wherever else they want to shoot these movies?" Dean's agent tried to change his mind. "But Dean, think about what this could do for your career. You could become an international superstar." Dean's response was classic Dean Martin. "I'm already successful enough. I don't need to be more successful if it means I can't be home to tuck my kids into bed." What Mort Viner and the Bond producers didn't fully understand was that Dean Martin had already achieved something that many Hollywood stars spent their entire careers chasing: a perfect work-life balance. Dean had structured his career so that he could maintain his family life, his friendships, and his personal routines, while still being enormously successful professionally. Dean's typical work schedule was the envy of Hollywood. He would arrive at recording sessions or film sets at exactly the time specified in his contract, perform his work with professional excellence, and leave promptly when his contracted hours were finished. He famously never took work home with him, never stayed late for additional takes unless absolutely necessary, and maintained strict boundaries between his professional and personal life. This approach had earned Dean a reputation in some circles as being lazy or uncommitted, but those who worked with him closely understood that it was actually a sophisticated form of professionalism. Dean delivered exactly what was required, when it was required, with a level of quality that few performers could match. But he refused to let his career consume his entire life. The James Bond offer represented everything that Dean Martin had spent years trying to avoid. It would require him to be away from home for months at a time, to commit to a multi-year schedule that would dictate where he lived and worked, and to subordinate his personal life to the demands of an international film franchise. When Cubby Broccoli received Dean's rejection, he was disappointed, but not entirely surprised. He had heard about Dean's reputation for prioritizing his personal life over career advancement. But Broccoli was also an experienced producer who understood that when one door closes, another often opens. Broccoli and Saltzman began looking at their second-tier list of potential Bond actors. They considered Cary Grant, who was interested but concerned about committing to a multi-film deal at his age. They looked at James Mason, David Niven, and several other established stars, but each had their own reservations about the project. Then Harry Saltzman remembered meeting a young Scottish actor named Sean Connery at a party in London. Connery was relatively unknown, having appeared in only a few films, but he had the physical presence and natural charisma that might work for Bond. More importantly, as a newcomer, he would be available for the extensive shooting schedule and multi-film commitment that had scared off more established stars. When Sean Connery auditioned for the Bond role, he brought an intensity and physical presence that was different from what Dean Martin would have offered. Where Dean would have brought smooth sophistication and effortless charm, Connery brought a more rugged, dangerous quality. He was Bond as a tough, working-class hero rather than Bond as a suave entertainer. Connery's casting proved to be inspired. When Dr. No was released in October 1962, it was an immediate international success. Connery's portrayal of Bond was exactly what audiences were looking for. Sophisticated enough to be believable as a secret agent, tough enough to be convincing in action scenes, and charismatic enough to carry a franchise. But here's where the story becomes even more interesting. Dean Martin's decision not to pursue James Bond directly led to his involvement in his own spy franchise. In 1965, 3 years after turning down Bond, Dean signed on to star in The Silencers, the first of 4 films based on Donald Hamilton's Matt Helm novels. The Matt Helm films were Dean's answer to James Bond, and they perfectly suited his personality and working style. Where Bond was serious and dangerous, Matt Helm was playful and tongue-in-cheek. Where Bond films required months of international location shooting, the Matt Helm films were shot primarily in Los Angeles and Las Vegas, allowing Dean to maintain his preferred lifestyle while still participating in the popular spy genre. Dean's Matt Helm was a parody of the spy genre that Bond had popularized, but it was also a reflection of Dean's own personality. Matt Helm was cool, laid back, and seemed to accomplish his mission through sheer force of charm rather than intense effort. The films were enormously successful, particularly The Silencers, which became one of Dean's biggest box office hits. In many ways, Dean Martin's Matt Helm films provided a perfect counterpoint to Sean Connery's James Bond. While Bond represented the fantasy of the dangerous, sophisticated secret agent, Matt Helm represented the fantasy of the effortlessly cool American who could save the world without breaking a sweat or missing his martini. The success of both franchises in the 1960s created an interesting dynamic in cinema. Bond films became increasingly elaborate and international in scope, while Matt Helm films remained distinctly American and somewhat self-aware about their own absurdity. Both approaches worked, but they appealed to different audiences and different fantasies about heroism and masculinity. Looking back, it's fascinating to consider how different cinema history might have been if Dean Martin had accepted the James Bond role. A Dean Martin Bond would likely have been more humorous, more American in sensibility, and probably less physically intense than Sean Connery's interpretation. The films might have been more comedy-oriented and less focused on elaborate action sequences. More significantly, if Dean had become Bond, Sean Connery might never have achieved international stardom. Connery's career was fundamentally shaped by his success as Bond, and without that role, he might have remained a relatively unknown Scottish actor. The entire trajectory of both men's careers would have been completely different. The James Bond franchise itself might have developed differently with Dean Martin in the lead role. Given Dean's working preferences and personality, the films might have been more Las Vegas-oriented, more focused on American locations, and probably shorter shooting schedules. The international, globe-trotting aspect of Bond that became so central to the franchise might never have developed. Industry insiders, who were aware of the original offer to Dean Martin, often speculated about the alternate universe where Dean became Bond. Director Howard Hawks, who had worked with Dean on Rio Bravo, once said, "Dean would have made a great Bond, but it would have been a completely different kind of Bond. Dean's Bond would have been the guy who saves the world, but still makes it home for dinner." Sean Connery himself, when asked about Dean Martin's original casting in later interviews, was gracious and thoughtful. "Dean Martin was already a star when I was nobody. If he had taken the Bond role, I probably never would have gotten the chance. In a way, I owe my entire career to Dean Martin's decision to stay home with his family." Dean Martin never publicly expressed any regret about turning down James Bond. In interviews throughout the 1960s and 1970s, when asked about the decision, he would typically shrug and say, "I made the right choice for me. I've got a great life, and I didn't need to travel all over the world to find it." The contrast between Dean's and Sean's approaches to their careers became a study in different definitions of success. Sean Connery became an international superstar and eventually won an Academy Award, but he also spent years trying to escape the Bond typecasting and often expressed frustration with the demands of fame. Dean Martin maintained his preferred lifestyle, continued to be successful in multiple entertainment mediums, and seemed genuinely content with his choices throughout his career. The Matt Helm films, while successful, never achieved the cultural impact of the James Bond franchise, but they served their purpose perfectly for Dean Martin. They allowed him to participate in a popular genre, maintain his career momentum, and do it all while staying close to home and keeping his preferred work schedule. Today, when film historians and fans speculate about alternate casting scenarios, Dean Martin as James Bond remains one of the most intriguing what-if scenarios in cinema history. It represents a fundamental fork in the road where one star's personal values shaped not only his own career, but inadvertently launched another actor to international stardom and influenced the development of one of the most successful film franchises of all time. The story also serves as a reminder that success in Hollywood can be defined in many different ways. Sean Connery chose the path of international stardom with all its rewards and complications. Dean Martin chose the path of work-life balance and personal contentment. Both men achieved their own version of success, and both left lasting legacies in entertainment history. But perhaps most importantly, Dean Martin's decision to turn down James Bond demonstrates that sometimes the most important career moves are the ones you don't make. By staying true to his own values and priorities, Dean not only maintained the lifestyle he wanted, but also inadvertently helped create one of the most iconic characters in film history. If this story of choosing personal values over career advancement moved you, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of Hollywood decisions that changed cinema history. Have you ever turned down an opportunity because it didn't align with your personal values? Share your experience in the comments below, And remember to ring that notification bell for more amazing stories about the roads not taken in entertainment history.